So I went back and I read what I call the Value Pricing Bible, called Implementing Value Pricing. And this is from page 241 and 242. So if you have the book, you can follow along. If you don't have the book, you need to buy this book. This book is actually the absolute Bible for everyone doing advisory work, especially understanding the pricing element of it. So I wanted to kind of emulate with you, Kirk, if you don't mind. Maybe you could be my small business client that I'm engaging into an advisory. Well, not necessarily advisory yet. I would say I'm engaging them into maybe some sort of accounting services, and I'm asking the questions that help me discover what is it that you value the most. So then in turn, I can figure out what to offer you. So are you up to it, Kirk?
I'm up for it. So just to paraphrase in maybe some of my Southernese, I'm going to be looking for a new accountant. And so you're going to interview me. You're going to try to have a value conversation.
Absolutely. So Kirk, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a series of questions that will help me understand in depth what your business is, what your business model is, and what you're trying to achieve by working with us. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Sounds good. Let's go.
Okay. And also I want to preface that at the end of our conversation, hopefully we figure out exactly where is it that we can add value. And then we'll come up with a fixed price that would be below the value that we can bring in. So for me, it's extremely important for me to understand in depth what is it that's valuable to you, so I know as a service professional where I can focus in. So is that understood?
Works for me.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you first. I'll start with an open-ended question that would allow me to understand why you're looking to work with me directly or with our firm. Is what do you expect from us?
Wow, it's a great question. I'd say number one, I expect you to do what you say you'll do. And I know that sounds almost coy, but at the same time, I think a lot of professionals that I've worked with in the past tend to overpromise and underdeliver, and I'd rather have it the other way around. I'd rather you kind of step back and promise less, but give me more. And I guess that just lets me know that you're really listening. And so that's probably the most important thing to me.
Okay, I really like that. Thank you for that. Now, how about, what do you think about every conversation that we have? Do you believe that I should make a summary of our conversation to just kind of read back to you what you told me, so we know exactly what your expectation is, and it makes sense that that we write it down and put it in writing, so at least you know that I understood and I registered what you told me?
I think it's always a good idea to confirm either verbally or in writing. Essentially, the old phrase, "This is what I heard you say," kind of repeat back to see how much comprehension there is. I think that's a good skill. So yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Awesome. And how often do you think we should have those conversations where I'm giving you immediate feedback of what I'm hearing from you?
I think as it comes naturally. I don't think there's a set interval, but I think, as you feel like we covered some significant ground, or if there's an area where you feel you want to make sure we're on the same page, feel free. And it can be verbal or in writing or a little of both. I'd say probably, if we're going to be having a regular conversation, whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever like that, it's probably good to summarize, afterward via email or something, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay, perfect. I mean, for most of my clients, and I don't want to diagnose anything at this point, just going to give you a general idea so you know where I'm going with this. For most of my clients, we have at least one conversation per year, because accounting is cyclical enough that we're at least dealing with, income tax or end of the year closing. Now, depending on the level of service that you want and how much you want us to be involved, we're going to be looking at narrowing that to maybe quarterly, monthly, or weekly. So we'll determine that at the end. So that's perfect. Thank you very much for that. So explain to me.
If I can interject, I would say if we're only talking once a year, then probably all we're doing is being reactive. I definitely want to make sure we're checking in at least on a quarterly basis, simply because, I want to be ahead of things and planning, and, I don't want things to happen to me. I want to determine what happens to other things in the financial plan of my business. That makes sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. So what you're telling me, and I'm gonna write this down, is that you expect us to be proactive.
Definitely.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Thank
I
you.
want the IRS reacting to me, not the other way around.
It's a good idea. All right. So explain to me a little bit about your business model. So you told me over the phone kind of what you do, but explain to me the business model, how you make money, how you get clients, and what does a good day look like to your business?
Oh, wow. There's really three good questions rolled into one there. So I'd say let's start with, what's our business model? So we are actually a professional services firm, which I guess is interesting because so are you. So there may be some similarities here, but bottom line, we provide custom software development to customers. That is the widget that we sell. Very complex and ambiguous widget to a lot of people. It sounds like voodoo and, black magic, Harry Potter kind of stuff. But the bottom line is really, I consider us to be business consultants who happen to leverage technology. Technology is just a tool for us. And what I'm looking for with the customers, I'm talking about with my customers, I'm looking for what is the opportunity in their business they're trying to seize, or what is a problem that they're trying to solve. It's typically one of those two things. And typically they will have already made some kind of self-diagnosis of, I think technology is going to help me here. It's going to help me increase sales or increase bottom line or, improve employee turnover or inventory turnover, or we're going to open a new location, or think about growing 15% this year, or whatever it is. There's something like that I'm trying to uncover. And what I try to do is then step in and go, okay, where does it make sense to use technology to help achieve that goal? Too many times people reach for technology when technology is really not the right tool. In fact, and I even find a lot of times I even back up and go, okay, are we even asking the right question? And when you put on the table, are we asking the right question? Then you also put on the table, well, are we even addressing the right problem? So I know I'm kind of being very vague, but that's where I like to start with a customer, is find out what is that opportunity they're trying to seize, what is that problem they're trying to solve. It may be one or the other or both, and then figure out, are they even addressing the right thing? That's where I start. And so that's very broad. That's how I try to engage my customer in the first conversation.
So if I understand, you do custom software development, and you take a lot of pride on that word custom, and the fact that no one else can do exactly what you do. I mean, they may have a similar skill set, but no one else can do exactly what you do. So your product is going to be very unique, and it will vary based on the circumstance. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I think a huge, probably 50% or more of the word custom in our business is our perspective that we bring to the table. Our ability to ask good questions, our ability to not accept what the customer says at face value, but to probe and dig and be willing to kind of go further and deeper early on than a lot of other service providers might. And in general, customers have one or two reactions to that. They either love it or they hate it. And if they hate it, that's fine. They can go find, another provider that's a better fit. We're looking for the ones who love it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for that. So I don't want to get too detailed into the numbers, but I think it just gives me a little bit of an idea, more or less, how many of these clients you actually engage in work during the year. Like how many total projects you're managing at any point in time. And if there's an average value that you can say, oh yeah, this is the sort of the sweet spot. Is there a one, or is the number really vary?
So I would say we typically are engaging between 12 to 15 new customers a year. Okay. And we're probably continuing to service around 6 to 8. So we have, a fairly low number of customers. Typically with new customers, we're building something from the ground up usually. And obviously with existing customers, we're continuing to enhance something we've already built. But that's kind of the typical, from 12 to 15 new for a year and about 6 to 8 existing. And obviously there's some turnover just because some people sell the business, some people, move on for other reasons, whatever. But that's kind of what we're typically working with. As far as the value we create, It's always in the 5 figures. I mean, if somebody engages us for a 4-figure return, it's they're going to be lucky to get break even. Okay, what we do is not cheap, and so I'm looking for. Typically, I want to be able to hit at least a 30 grand return for somebody, if not higher. And we can easily get into the 6 figures. It depends on how we're approaching the engagement. In the past, we tend to take more of a overall approach, trying to, tackle the whole thing at once. Now we're much more doing things in phases. So the value created, I guess I'd have to think about, is that per phase or is that over a year or 2 years time? But typically, on a phase, I want to hit a 5-figure number, and in a year or two's time, I want to make sure we're hitting at least 6, if not 7.
Okay, I really appreciate that. I love learning from my customers. So you actually didn't tell me how much you charge for your services. You told me how much value you bring to your customers. Therefore, I assume that pricing it a little bit lower, it's easy to justify. I think that's what the message you were trying to give me, correct?
Right. I mean, it's fairly easy to assume that, if we're creating 6-figure value, we need to be charging in the 5 figures, right? Typically, now that can vary, but I would say, our typical, I tend to look at our pricing typically falls into, either what I consider low 5-figure, mid, or high. Tends to fall into one of those 3 categories. Okay. Simply because we take a phased approach. So, I don't quote somebody $1 million project. We'll wind up doing, 4 to 8 projects that might accumulate to that over time. And that's on the high end. We tend to work with mostly small business. So even, $1 million projects are uncommon for us, although we have done a couple.
Okay. So those are all like sort of the positive side of the projects. Can you describe a project that in the last couple of years turned out not to be profitable or to make you lose money, or maybe the customer itself didn't get the value for whatever reason, and you ended up having to close the project and not go all the way through? Is there a typical case? And after you tell me, I like to link it to accounting somehow to see, whether accounting had a role in that breakage in any way.
Sure. So I would say the number one reason that projects may not turn out the way that the customer or we envisioned at the beginning is simply because of the lack of follow through on the customer's part. What I mean by that is one of the things that customers need to do when they work with us, but yet they don't necessarily enjoy it, is they need to be able, getting toward the end of the project, to be able to test it. They need to go back and essentially kick the tires and test drive it, but involves test driving it multiple times to make sure that, number one, there are no critical bugs, but also that it meets their workflow and et cetera. So that's probably the biggest challenge. We have some customers who just can't seem to get over that hurdle. And we've done some things in the way we position that as a quality metric that have helped, but that's probably the number one issue. I would say number two would just be, there are occasionally times where we misscope something, right? Something takes more, or we misdiagnose it. I mean, we're not perfect. So I in a roundabout way, it sounds like I just said, okay, 50% of the time it's customer, 50% of the time it's us. But those are the two big issues. I'd say customers who cannot stay with the follow through that's necessary on something like this, or two, we make a mistake somewhere in typically the scoping of it. Those are the two things that can really get us. It doesn't happen often, but those are the ones that when they do happen, it usually falls into one of those 2 categories.
Okay. And we started this conversation with you telling me that it's really important for me to pay close attention to what you're telling me and understand what you're asking me. And then if I tell you I will do it, that we will execute on it. And you also specifically asked for me to be proactive. So discussing that particular pain point of the projects that don't go the way you wanted to go, what role can me or my firm proactively take to help you overcome those issues?
It's a good question. And I'll be honest with you, I'm having trouble tying how an accountant's going to have a direct impact on that. I mean, the main thing I could think of would just be sometimes there are actually projects where we have to do some accounting integration, and obviously getting a third party, point of view on that. But that's really, more from a aspect of bringing you in kind of as an advisor on the project. Almost an independent advisor type role than it is helping us directly with our finances. I mean, so I'm having trouble making that connection. If there's, I don't know if I answered the question you're asking, but
no, that makes total sense. You want me to give you some examples of stuff that we've done in the past with companies of your industry where you can say, oh, I can see the connection there, or would you like to move on?
Sure. If you want to give you some examples.
So one of the best answers I think I get from my customers that are highly satisfied is, Hector, you don't know my business enough to tell me what to do or how to do it, but you do know your business well enough for me not to tell you what to do and how to do it. So as long as you can take care of the accounting in such a way that it doesn't take time away from me, or that I have to be, heavily involved in the day-to-day tasks, where you can essentially come in and take away that weight off my shoulders and I can concentrate on my customers, on business development, that would be a way you can indirectly help. Does that resonate with something that will be valuable for you?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I put that in the category of you take care of it so I don't have to worry about it. Right.
Okay.
I want you to tell me, okay, payroll tax rate has changed, or, hey, we got to file the unemployment tax thing, or, if the franchise tax returns come and due, I want you to be telling me that stuff and to be handling it. If you need information, I want to make sure we have the systems in place that get you the information without it requiring a lot on me. So yeah, I guess now that you paint the picture that way, I don't want to spend my time worrying about the finances other than, I need to be aware of it to make decisions. But the transactional part of it, knowing what's coming, I don't want to deal with that. I just don't. I've got other things I enjoy doing more. Those are necessary to me. At least those compliance kind of things are just necessary evil. And keep me out of jail.
No, we definitely absolutely keep you out of jail, because otherwise you couldn't pay my bills in jail. So it behooves me to keep you out of jail. Anyway, so yeah, absolutely. Don't. That's the type of service that we provide. So, or we're going to try to provide. Now, just a direct question about the way we're going to work together in answer to what you're saying. So I cannot make decisions in your behalf. Like I can't write a check to a vendor. I can't fire an employee. I can't call a customer and say, hey, pay my customer, right? So in some cases, clients want us to be heavily involved in not decision making, but let's call it pre-decision making, which is the role of a proactive advisor, which is come to the table with some ideas saying, hey, I detected these 2-3 areas of risk, and I think these are the ideas, but then you ultimately would make that decision. Or would you like to be involved in the decision-making process, where I would call you and say, hey, I see an issue here, let's think through it. So what do you prefer, that I bring the issues to you and we think through the solution together? Or would you like me to suggest some solutions up front for you to choose from, so you can have just sort of a narrower thought process?
I tend to be a big picture kind of guy. So I think, ideally I'd love for you to come to me and say, here's the issue, here are 3 options. What do you think? What questions do you have? Right? That would be ideal. Obviously, if it's a significant thing, I mean, for example, and I'm just going to throw this out, if you're going, hey, based on the new tax changes, we need to consider changing, the entity structure of your business. Yeah, I'm going to need a little more on that, right? Because that's a big deal. But and there, I guess, I say big deal. What I really mean is the degree of it. I really expect you to use your judgment to kind of make a decision about the degree. And if you need some input from me on the degree, I'm happy to give it. But I'm really looking for you to at least take the first swing at stuff, so that I can just come in and go, okay, here's the issue, here's 3 solutions, we talk through them, and then we move on.
Okay. So you expect me to be taking changes of the tax code and sort of apply them in simulation to your numbers. And for me to be proactive coming up to you saying, hey, we have a huge missed opportunity. We should think about this. So you want me to be proactive about that, correct?
Certainly. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. I don't want to be, I don't want to be reactive. I want to be, responsive.
Okay, that's perfect. Now, let me ask you a question, because you told me that you've been in business for several years. Before working with us, have you worked with another accounting firm, or were you doing all the accounting on your own?
Yes, I probably had 3 accountants over the life of the business. And I'd say each one probably served us about 5 or 6 years, give or take. Probably some more. I'm probably off on the numbers a little bit, but each one we've worked with has probably been roughly a half decade or a little more.
Okay. And can you tell me one really good thing that each of them did for you? Something that really stands out?
Oh, wow. I can't really remember that much about the first one. It's been so long. I mean, that's over a decade, but I can go to the second two. I'd say that the second one was really good about when we talked. He had his head in the game. I didn't feel like he was distracted by something. I felt like when we talked, he was there. Kind of the issue I had with it, particularly later on, he got to a period of growth in his business where he basically could not service us in a timely manner. And I won't get into it any more than that, but as his business was growing, it just became a point where the great service we'd had in the past changed. And after bringing that to the mind at least a couple times, it didn't really seem to have an impact. The second one, or the third one, I guess, but the second one I'm going to talk about, I guess as our business evolved, we moved to an accountant who kind of offered more of a consultative approach, almost like a coaching approach. With the second accountant, our meetings were always focused on the transactions, the payrolls, the tax returns, all that. With the third one, those things just got handled, and our conversations were beyond the tax and payroll stuff. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm being very vague, but yet that's a distinct difference when I think about the second and third accountants.
Right. No, that makes the most sense. So the one that you are talking about, that's the most recent, had, hey, don't worry about my like, make me feel that I don't need to worry about my accounting approach. And then when you're there for me, you're going to have a consultative coaching approach. So that sounds a lot like the way we work. So I'm worried if you don't mind telling me what went wrong, that the fact that it's making you think about changing, or, did they do something that I must take note that I should never do because it's sort of a make or break, or is there another reason why you're considering switching?
Well, to be honest, the reason I'm considering switching is my previous accountant made a decision to focus on a market that I'm not in, kind of made a shift in the direction of their business, and we kind of came to a mutual agreement that it probably wasn't a good fit moving forward. So
he's working if you don't mind me digging deep, and this will be the last question I ask you about that. So he's working with other industries that is not like yours, or he's not doing the particular tasks that you want.
Working with another industry. So he as his business was growing and evolving, he was going deeper into one particular industry niche, I guess, that really was a fit for him. And it's an area where he'd had success. We were kind of an outlier. I didn't realize it at first, and maybe it just had evolved this over time. But after the conversation with him, I realized our business really was an outlier for him at that point. And so.
Okay. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you an open-ended question about that, because it'll give me tons of insight about what you expect from us. So assuming that we are the right fit, and we focus and work in your industry enough that it makes sense to you, what type of value does that bring to you? So me and my firm being focused on your industry and proving to you that we understand the industry, and that's the lake that we swim in. How is that valuable to you, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you knowing my industry, I mean, if you've worked with other companies that are in, custom software, that's great. I don't think it's necessarily essential because I feel like I know my business. So whether you know my business, I'm more interested in you knowing, the accounting side of business. So I guess the short answer is that's really not that important to me. In other words, in this previous relationship, it was important to that accountant, but it wasn't important to me.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if you don't mind, if I'll interpret back to you what I think I understand is you want our firm to care about you the entire time and not to have our head somewhere else. Is that what you're pretty much telling me?
Yeah. At first there, I thought you were going to say, yeah, you don't want us to have our head up or you know what.
Right. So because the first person, you said that the best thing that they had was that when you were talking to them on the phone, he or she had head in the game, which means that they were 100% focused on you, not looking at the phone, not thinking about other clients. So that level of one-on-one attention that you were getting when you were in person, you want to also feel that even when you're not meeting with your accounting firm. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, it's interesting. The more we talk about this, I realize, my idea accountant would be, I felt like the second one did a better job of listening and making me feel like they were genuinely interested in what was going on. But the third one had probably better systems in place to handle kind of just the routine payroll, tax, that kind of thing. I'd love to get those two things together.
Okay. So high-tech systems are important to you. You want systems that connect with your current system, that integrate, that keep you alert and give you access to reports. Is that something that I'm hearing that's important to you?
To be honest, I don't care whether the systems are automatic, manual, whatever. I mean, that's your thing. I want to know that, handling those things is routine for you. It's part of your process. And, I know it's going to be handled because, with ALTaccountant, that stuff just happened because it was just so much a part of what they did, not because it was the only thing they did, but it's just they had worked their systems out. It was a well-oiled machine when it came to taxes and payroll and that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay. And the last question about that is, what are some of the things that we can do or fail to do, which would be an absolute deal breaker?
Not responding. if I email or call you, I need you to respond, and that's really it. I mean, with both the accountants I've worked with, that at toward the end of the relationship, that's always been the issue. In fact, I mentioned that was the reason I left the second one.
And is the expectation a particular timeline, like the number of days, number of hours? Is there a specific way? Do you want to be responded on the same way that you contact us? Like if you email me, do I need to call you back or I need to email you back? Or what exactly do you need that response to be? And I'm going to write that down because that's pivotal for us.
I'd say in general, you can respond to me the way I reach out to you. And I don't have a problem if I reach out to you by phone and you're, for example, you're at a conference, if you or even somebody from your firm just reaches out, hey, we got your message. We won't be able to get to it for 2 days till Hector gets back, from his trip to Bahamas or whatever. That's fine. But just not knowing anything drives me nuts. And if I have to ask more than twice, that gets annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you say 48 hours, 24 hours? Was that an important timeline? Did you have a particular time frame in mind?
Probably, 48 hours generally. I mean, I guess assess the degree of the issue.
Right. Not a problem. Not a problem. What I will do at the end, and I don't want to jump to that yet, but what I'll do at the end is that when I'll give you some options. In some of the options, I will include response time as the option. So based on how important response time is to you, we can increase the level of service a little bit. And just some of the reasoning is we tend to take less clients that want a faster response time. Not that we're not going to take you. What I'm saying is we have a smaller group of one, because obviously, the more people that need 24-hour response time and that sort of thing, the harder it is to actually do in the real world. I'm sure you have the same issue with your customers, which is one of the beautiful parts about only doing 5 to 10 projects a year, what you mentioned that you're doing. But unfortunately for us, in some cases we may be in a situation that we're dealing with maybe 100 people, and we want to give everyone the response time, but we will charge for that premium for us to allocate the resources. And that being said, you mentioned someone from my team. Do you have a specific need for me, myself, who's a partner in the firm, to answer every single one? Or would you be okay with a qualified individual in my team to give you the answer?
Generally, I'm okay with a qualified individual. I mean, when I expect to talk to you is going to be if it's a more critical issue, or, like I said, I want us to be responsive, not reactive. So we're going to need to keep in touch at least on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently. And the other thing I'd add, just from what you said earlier, I tend to expect the same things from the people that work with me, meaning, outside consultants or partners, as I expect of myself. And I like my nights and weekends, so I kind of expect you guys, to work a regular week, take vacations and breaks and stuff like that. It's not my expectation that, if I send you an email at night that you have to respond that night, or, whatever, unless it's critical. If the IRS shows up at my door, which won't happen, right? Because you're taking care of that.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. It will absolutely not happen. That would be our commitment. All right. Now, that's it for giving us a really good idea for what your expectations are. I'm going to go ahead and take the conversation that we had over the phone at first, where you told me some of the technical aspects of your accounting, and today's conversation, which really lets me understand what your expectations are. And I'll put together a plan